Hey, Mike, what do Kelly Slater and PT have in common?
I don't know. They're both world champs?
Nope, they both own Endless Summer box set.
Oh my God, rad. You guys, you can get it too. The link's in the show notes. Hey everybody, welcome to the QuiverCast, where we chat with surfers from all around the world, from all walks of life, and we get their story. Find us at www.thequivercast.com. I am Mike, your host. Let's get into the show. Hello, everybody. This is Mike here with the QuiverCast, and we have the East Coast surfer from the Outer Banks, Noah Snyder. How you doing, Noah?
I'm good, man. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you so much for doing this. I'm pretty stoked, actually. There, you're from the Outer Banks. How is that? How's the waves there?
When we get the waves, they're pretty much phenomenal. Anywhere from a little bit overhead to double overhead to triple overhead. The only disadvantage we have sometimes is, we don't have a lot of jetties and stuff here, so a lot of your breaks are really exposed to all the wind and the weather and all that kind of stuff. So you're kind of at the elements of whatever Mother Nature's throwing at you.
First off, what city do you live? Do you actually live on the Outer Banks, or do you live inside?
So the town stretch that I live in, there's 3 towns. It's Kitty Hawk, which I live in,
Okay.
Kildeville Hills, and then Nags Head. And then you get to basically where you transition onto the island, which is Pea Island, Rodanthe, Waves, Hatteras, Buxton. So it's like this strip of land that basically runs down and then hooks around once you get to Hatteras. So it's a pretty unique place.
To get on the island, how many entrances are there?
You have 2. You have one that is through Currituck and then one that's through Manio. And then and that puts you kind of on our barrier island. And then once you head south towards Rodanthe, you got to pass over Oregon Inlet Bridge. And that puts you kind of onto more on Hatteras and Pea Island and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, if the bridges went out, if the only other way to get there is by boat or jet ski.
Has that happened? That's never happened, has it?
It has. One year
Really?
there was a barge that hit Oregon Inlet Bridge and did some structural issues to the pylons, and so the only way to get across was by ferry.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can be secluded pretty easily, pretty quickly too.
Yeah, that's the beauty of the place, and it's also can be kind of the downfall too. If you can't get on or off, you're kind of stuck, and whatever you have is what you have.
So do you prepare for that in advance? Do you always have extra?
Yeah, you try to. When we know hurricanes and stuff are coming, we're got the generators, you got extra water, extra food, and candles, flashlights, all that kind of stuff. Because if it goes down, you as you've seen from all the other hurricanes that have hit, it takes a while for the place to get back on its feet.
Yeah, for sure. The island itself, and in front of you, where you basically surf, do you surf the same spot all the time?
It's always changing.
It's always changing.
You've kind of got some go-to spots that are pretty good and are fairly consistent, but the sandbars are always kind of changing up. But you kind of know of certain areas that the sand seems to collect pretty consistently.
Okay. And then summer, how's summer? So winter, so you get the late summer, you get the hurricanes. So
Yeah.
that's obviously when there's going to be swell, which there's plenty of footage of you surfing.
Yeah, so if you take this year, for example, our summer was probably one of the worst summers we've ever had. We had a couple small little swells, but nothing too crazy. But we had a pretty long stretch. There was just nothing. It was just knee high, maybe waist high at best every day. Water was cold, wind was offshore. And then all of a sudden, September hit and everything just started to switch. And then we just got this hurricane surf that lasted for, last swell was 3-4 days swell.
Wow. Long. And the water was cold, you said?
In the summer, we get the hard offshore winds.
Yes.
And it creates a lot of updwelling.
Yep.
And so a lot of the warm water gets blown out. We did have a period this year where we did have some consistently kind of like light onshore breezes. So it did stay warmer in the month of June than in past years. Usually in June, if we get surf, you're still putting on at least a 3-2 because the upswelling and the water and all that kind of stuff is pretty chilly. Yeah. Once you get into July and August, it starts getting a lot warmer. And then it stays pretty warm into like September, October. And then once you get around like November, Thanksgiving time, the water starts to cool back down.
Wow. Okay. So what's the highest the water temperature gets and what's the lowest? So let's say September, October, 75, 80?
Yeah, it can be 75, 80. Middle of August can sometimes get like 82, 83.
Okay.
And then, of course, the opposite extreme is wintertime, January, February, March. I've seen it as low as upper 30s, low 40s.
Whoa. And you're going out?
Yep.
Okay. So how do you do that? Like physically and mentally, how do you like prepare for that? Like leaving the house knowing it's going to be that cold?
I used to. I don't do it anymore. I probably should. I used to get these big, those big water jugs. Mm-hmm. Where you get like a blue water or whatever in them. They're like 5 gallons. We used to like get those once you're done with them. We just fill them up with hot tap water.
Okay.
And then you take them, put them in your truck, wrap them in towels. And then at the end of a session, or if you knew you were going to go back out and you got super cold, you would just come in, open up your suit and just pour that hot water in your suit. And it almost like gives you like a fresh start.
Okay. Wow.
But when it's that cold, it's just brutal. I mean, there's no other way to like, you can't really describe it. I mean, you come in and you're grabbing your keys or you're trying to grab something and your hand, it's like Spock hands. And you're just like, nothing's working.
Yeah.
So
that's crazy. So, okay. So how old were you when you started surfing and why did you start surfing?
Yeah, so I'm originally from Baltimore, Maryland, and then my dad came down here when I was 6 months old. Mm-hmm. He fell in love with the place and never went back. So I've been here since I was 6 months old. He tried to get me in the water when I was like 8 or 9, but it didn't happen. It was like I wasn't ready for it. I actually cried my way back to the beach. The first time he tried to get me out on a board, I was like, no, this is horrible. But it wasn't until I was like about 12 and I was at the beach with him one day and he was playing volleyball and he had his surfboard there and it just all clicked. I just grabbed it, decided to paddle around, and then this little wave came in and I remember just like standing up, going down the line, and it just all clicked. And I was like, that was like the best thing ever.
Yeah. Right.
I was like, I want to do this more. And so that was kind of like my aha moment where I was like, whoa, this is rad.
Yeah, that's totally a good story. Did your dad surf?
Yeah, so he surfed. He had a big group of friends that he surfed with. And, so I was always kind of like going to the beach, hanging out, watching him, kind of doing my own thing too. Just because at that age, I wasn't sure like what I wanted to do. And I was just all about having fun and like playing. But I remember when the waves would come up, he was like, we got to go. Let's go get your stuff. It was like this mad rush. And I was like, okay, and so the few times I went with him, and I remember like seeing the ocean on some days when I was smaller, I was like, holy cow, it's pretty massive, pretty big, a lot of water moving. So that's kind of where I think a lot of my early respect for the ocean came into play. Because sometimes people, you see them here, they're tourists, they come down and they like start jumping in the water and they have no idea like about the undertow, the currents, and before you know it, they're in a heap of trouble. So I learned pretty quick at a very young age, like you got to have respect for the ocean.
Yeah, 100%. So did your dad surf up in Baltimore?
I think he did, but
or like Maryland, I guess.
Yeah, Maryland. Like his mom kind of lived in the Bay Area, so they weren't too far away from the ocean. But it was a little bit of a hike. But Maryland, where they lived, and this place, it's like two different worlds. So
is it?
I can see where like he fell in love with this place, because it's the same reason I fell in love with it, because it's like you go down Hatteras Island and you can just get away from everything. There's no houses until you get like into Rodanthe. And it's basically a stretch of road, and you got ocean on your left side and sound on your right.
Yeah.
And that's it.
That your dad surfed. Does he still surf? And
Yeah, he still surfs.
surfs with you? You guys surf together?
Occasionally. He's gotten to the age where he likes a little bit mellower wave than I do.
Yeah, I get that.
But he goes out when it's big. So
What's your dad's name?
Robbie Snyder.
Oh, okay, right on.
Yeah.
All right. So he had this love for surfing, and he wanted you to have it, but you just weren't ready for it. So when the time came, how did everything change in the house? So now you're a 12-year-old, 13-year-old surfing.
I started just wanting to ride his boards, and I just didn't know what came with everything, so I got in trouble a couple times, and he made it very clear, like, this is your board, this is my board, like, you stay in this lane, don't come over here in this lane. But it was good. I mean, he helped me in a lot of ways. He helped me overcome some of my fears. I remember the first time my leash broke, when it was pretty good size, and I got freaked out, and he was just like paddled up to me. He's like, don't panic. He goes, rule number 1, you never panic. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, he was like, now swim. And he made me swim all the way in when I was wanting to like crawl up on his board. And
yes.
He's like, no, you swim, you go. I'm right here, but you're not coming up on this board. You're going to learn. And basically he ended up telling me, he's like, look, he goes, if you're relying on that leash to save your life, it's not a good thing to rely on.
So what did that teach you? You needed to train, or like?
It just taught me I needed to learn how to swim. I needed to learn how to become comfortable in fearful moments. And that even though it seemed bad, a lot of times we'd build it up in our mind, and it's a big battle that goes on up here. It's like, am I going to make it? Am I not going to make it? Am I going to get to the surface in time? So fear can keep you from a lot of what you want to do, and it can hinder a lot of your, performances and all that kind of stuff. So that moment for me was just kind of like, yeah, I've got to like not let that take hold of me and like grip me. Like I need to deal with that, So I started swimming more. I started prepping. And then as I started getting in bigger surf, I realized like, oh, you better do a little bit of training. Yeah.
As the waves got bigger, and they're kind of like, when I see the East Coast, when it's firing and it's pumping, there's like peaks everywhere, but it's thick, it's dark, it's kind of gnarly. It's not like that crystal clear, pretty water you see.
Yeah, I mean, it will beat the tar out of you. And a lot of times there is no channel. So it's kind of like Porto in a lot of ways. It's once you catch that first wave and you ride it all the way in, your way back out it's kind of like a little bit of a battlefield. It's like, you're like, do I go left? Do I go right? Do I hang and wait and let these waves come in? Or do I try to like get out as quick as I can and try to navigate through them? And, you're hoping one doesn't pick you off.
Yeah.
But it's gonna happen. So
eventually, yeah. So how many kids your age were surfing with you at this time? Were there a lot, or were you kind of solo?
There was a couple. They were a little bit older than me. The McManus brothers, Buzz Midget, Ricky Powers, Rob Young, Tom Chance. It was just kind of like this whole little crew. And Ricky and I were like the younger ones. And we just began to fall in love with the sport, and they were doing contests, and then we started doing contests, and then all of a sudden sponsors were starting to notice us, and then it just kind of became like this domino effect, so it's like, as we got better, we kind of got to see more, experience more. And that's kind of where it all like began for me, where I was like, ooh, I kind of like this competitive thing.
Oh, so you enjoyed it?
Yeah. I mean, first contest I didn't, because I got dead last. I got third place out of 3 people.
How old were you then?
I think I had just turned, I think I was like 14.
Okay.
Like I started surfing at 12.
Yeah.
And then 14, I started competing in the boys division. And then really when I hit about 15, 16, that's where just kind of everything kind of jumped to like the next level where I felt more confident. I actually started winning some heats, and the ball just felt like it was kind of like rolling in my court.
Okay. So, and then you said sponsors were looking at you. Were you going up and down the East Coast? And how can you compare the waves if you were?
Yeah, I was starting to like make my way up to like Virginia, Maryland, doing some of the ESA contests, regionals, championships, all that kind of stuff. And the waves in Virginia weren't as good as, the waves that we get. In Maryland, it can get pretty crazy too.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah, there's some good spots up there.
Wow.
Hopefully I don't get in trouble for saying that.
Yeah, because I was totally unaware of I would never think Maryland.
Yeah, and Delaware. So as I began to kind of travel around and then down into Florida and Georgia, you just got to see, all the different setups. And,
Okay.
And every setup had its challenges. And, learning to surf smaller waves was probably the thing that I had to conquer the most.
Really?
Yeah.
Why? You needed the push on the big waves?
Yeah, because the waves here, even when it's like waist to chest high,
Yep.
they have a lot of push.
Okay.
But then a waist high wave in Virginia or Florida doesn't have as much push.
Really? Interesting.
So I was used to this power that the waves were offering. And, a lot of times I wasn't necessarily having to generate my own speed. I was kind of taking what the wave was giving me. But then I'd go to these other places and it was like, man, these waves they're kind of slower. They don't stand up as much. And so you end up having to ride different boards and begin to figure that whole thing out. And so it was definitely a little bit of an adjustment for me, and then I would come up against these guys that they've been surfing Virginia or Florida their whole life. And they're just like, whoo, 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 and boom. And, and I'm not like a little stick guy either. I'm more stocky frame, a lot of guys were like 130 pounds maybe, and I was like 150, 160. So I just had a little bit stockier build. So smaller waves for me, kind of like Wes. Wes, kind of same way. He's super tall.
Yep.
He had to figure out like, hey, how do I navigate these waves? I'm much taller than my competitors.
Yes.
So for me, it was kind of similar.
And you talked about Wes Lane. Was he one of the guys you were looking up to? And who else were you looking up to, if anybody else on the East Coast?
Yeah, Wes was, he was the guy that charged. And if you paddled out on the water when he was out on a good day, and there's some classic stories behind all this, but if a good wave came to you and you didn't go, you never heard the end of it from Wes. He would harass you and razz you and just basically tear you a new behind.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I mean, like I remember this one time we were out and this crazy wave came in and Jesse Hines, was another up and comer with me.
Yeah.
It came right to Jesse and we all knew Jesse wasn't going to make it. And Wes is going, go, you better go. And Jesse, you just like saw the look in his eye and he's like, yeah, I'm probably not going to make this one. And it was this big, thick wedge, and Jesse just turned around, and he didn't even make it to his feet, and just got completely dusted. And then, he comes up, and then everybody's like, yeah, and then Wes is like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. And it just got Wes fired up. So
what's the difference in age between you guys and Wes?
I think he probably has us by at least 10 years.
Okay.
I don't know exactly.
No, that's fine. I'm just curious because, so he's had the Hawaiian experience. It seems like he brought what he's learned in bigger waves elsewhere and was pushing you guys, kind of seeing where you guys needed to be.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
Yeah. He was just like, he was kind of like the enforcer in a lot of ways, but if he was out there and you paddled out, he would either make your life lovely or he'd make your life miserable.
How was he on the beach?
Oh, he was great.
Okay.
Like, he's a tall guy. I think at first he probably intimidated the crap out of me, but
Okay.
super nice. He'd literally give you the shirt off his back. Yeah, like super awesome human. I mean, I love the guy.
But he was helping you guys, pushing you guys to just charge, basically. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, and especially he could kind of see like the next generation coming. And I think he saw it as an opportunity to like pour into us and to be like, hey, if you really want this and you want to make it, well, this is what you got to do. There is no other way. Like, you've got to go to Hawaii. You've got to charge. You've got to go to Backdoor. You've got to go to Pipe. And we were just like, okay, yes, sir.
Now you're getting pushed by Westland and some of the other guys on the East Coast. And then you talk about Hawaii. What was your first trip to Hawaii? Why did you go and how was it?
My first trip to Hawaii was, I went because I knew it's something that I had to do. And if I was going to make it as a professional surfer, it was like on the books. Like, you just got to go. You got to do it. And I had gotten to a point where I'd gotten kind of comfortable with bigger waves here. And I had heard stories of Hawaii and, seen, the movie North Shore and all that kind of stuff. And I was just like, okay. I was like, and then I had an opportunity to go with Lynn Shell, who was shaping all my boards for my first trip. And he had a place to stay. And it was just like, yeah, let's go. Let's do it. And so I went, and it was eye-opening in a lot of ways.
Okay.
You're laughing.
Well, yeah. So talk about eye-opening how. It was just much bigger than your big waves or what you were surfing in North Carolina?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was like the waves moved faster. They were thicker. Like, it was just a whole nother, like, it's almost like another sport in a lot of ways.
Okay, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, because you had to ride different boards and everything was just, it was just much more crazy. And then, I mean, you wiped out over there and it felt like you were getting hit by a Mack truck. It was just, everything was so different. I mean, you watch those guys that eat it at Pipe and Backdoor and all these places, and literally when you're under the water, it feels like your limbs are getting ripped from you and you're going this way and that way and up and down all within a second. And you're just getting completely beat. And then all of a sudden it kind of releases you and you come up and you're like, oh my gosh, am I intact? Am I okay? And then you grab your board, you paddle back out and you're like, holy cow, that was like the craziest thing ever. Yeah, so that whole experience and just the power of those waves. I remember the first time standing on the beach at Pipe and the waves are breaking and I can feel the rumbles and the vibrations in the sand.
Okay.
And I was just like, I don't feel this at home.
Yeah.
It was just crazy.
Did you paddle at that day at Pipe? When it was doing that?
I mean, my first day, first time I went out at Pipe and Backdoor, it was only like 3 to 5 feet. And I paddled out with Bob Hovey, who was a boogie boarder, really good boogie boarder here that had gone out there for years. And so he was familiar with the place. And he's like, yeah, come on, let's go. And I was petrified. Like, I was like, it wasn't that big, but you're seeing the reef, you're seeing this and that, you're watching people take off, and the energy of the crowd, and like, how many people were there, and it's just a whole nother. It's like being in a stadium. It's very overwhelming, and I had to kind of come to grips with myself. I was like, okay, like, I'm here. I know I can surf bigger waves. It was just a matter of getting comfortable.
And did you get comfortable? And what year was that? How old were you then? What age bracket?
Yeah, so that was when I was 19.
You were 19.
Yeah, I just turned 19 and had gone out there. And yeah, that was my first trip. And it was just one of those things where it was probably about a weekend. And I had been sponsored by the company Flow Hose, which is
Yep.
like a sandal company.
Yep.
And they knew that I was going out there, and they're like, hey, here's Brian Bielman's number. You need to contact him. We need to get him to take some photos of you surfing and some photos of you in our sandals. And we're gonna run an ad. Like, and I was like, no pressure, right? So I get out there, and I had made contact with him. And he's like, yeah. I talked to your sponsors. When the surf kind of comes up a little bit more, I'll call you and we'll get you out there. So I get the call, and he's like, yeah, I'm going down to Pipe back door. Meet me down there. I go down there. It's 6 to 8 foot and just macking, and I'm like, and he's like, "You ready, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, yeah." And I had called my buddy Bob. I'm like, "Hey, do you mind going out with me?" And and we went out, and it was that aha moment where like everything kind of came together, and this wave came my way that was solid, and I stood up halfway down the face, just completely airdropped all the way to the bottom, got down to the bottom, completely got hammered, smashed, you name it, like ragdolled, came up, and I was like, did that thing where I was like checking all my body parts.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, that was crazy. And I survived.
Yeah.
And it was in that moment where I gained a lot of confidence just off of a wipeout.
Mm-hmm.
And I paddled back out, and he was like, how was that one? I was like, I got killed. He's like, well, there's more coming. And so I actually ended up catching like 2 or 3 really good waves that day, and got a couple of photos that were like standout photos, and it all worked out. And it was kind of like that moment of like, am I going to do this or am I not? And I was kind of put to the test, like without even really having time to think.
Okay, so is that the picture you have on your Instagram where it says "This wave changed my life"? That backdoor wave. So anyhow, there's a big, like way big backdoor, I think, wave, and you wrote on your Instagram, "This wave changed my life."
So that was actually my second trip to Hawaii.
Okay, so that's a different life changing moment.
Yeah, but this was like this was my first trip where I realized like, hey, I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
I actually liked it. I enjoyed the bigger surf, and so I was like, cool, I want to do more of this. And then and then I went, and I think that was either the second or the third season. I'm kind of old now. So
Yep.
my memory's a little bit like joggled, but that was like that photo that you're talking about. That was memorable. I still had that vision in my head.
How did it change your life?
And part of the reason I had that vision in my head was because the lighting that day, the way the lighting was, and as I was dropping in, it was like everything went in slow motion, and everything went golden inside this cavern.
Yeah,
and I didn't make the barrel. It actually ended up closing out on me, but it was by far at that point the biggest barrel I'd ever got in my life. And same thing, I kind of came up after it closed out, ragdolled, you name it. And I was so stoked. I mean, I think I had a smile that was like, I didn't erase for like years.
Yeah.
I was just like, that was awesome. And I'd gotten a couple other waves that day that were really good. So, that trip was a game changer.
Right on. Okay. In Hawaii, being an East Coast guy, how many other East Coast guys did you know that were there at the same time? And how were you treated on the island by the locals?
I was, for the most part, treated pretty well. I mean, Hawaii is the type of place, if you go there and you show respect and you give respect and you kind of wait and you don't do anything stupid and you charge, you're eventually going to get some respect. They're going to see it. And at that point, a lot of the guys that were the heavy hitters, they'd be like, they would tell their friends like, no, like he's okay. He's good to go, but then you'd watch other guys paddle out there that thought like they owned the place. And you would see fights, and you'd see just crazy things. Guys get put in their place, like Hawaiians surrounding the guy, like just completely like, letting him know like he had messed up.
Yep.
And, I was told very early on I had a lot of mentors along the way, but Scott Bouchard from Florida, it took me many years, but right off the bat, he was like, you don't want to be that guy.
Yeah.
He's like, you show respect. You go out, you surf, you put your head down. You don't really try to talk to anybody unless they talk to you. Mm-hmm. And he's like, and you charge, you go. If a good wave comes and people are hooting at you, you better go. Just like Wes said.
So you never pulled back?
No.
You had to go.
No, it was always go. I mean, and it's crazy because, years later, I was in Hawaii, and we were on a different trip, and basically like unfortunately had the opportunity to watch a guy take his last breath, surf his last wave.
Oh, no.
And I was one of the guys that pulled him up on a board, and he didn't make it. So,
no, that sucks.
And I had wiped out before, not exactly like how this guy had wiped out, but pretty close to it, so it was kind of like just another one of those aha moments where you're just like, wow, like life is short, life is crazy. There's no guarantees, but, coming up through the surf ranks, it's like, if you're out in Hawaii and a good wave comes to you, you got to go.
Wow. Did that change your life, watching this guy, what happened to him?
It did, because that was like, my son had just been born. He was like 6 months old.
Wow.
And I was in Hawaii on a trip filming for Steel Roots, which was a faith-based company that was doing like a reality TV show.
Okay. And
Jesse Hines was there with me, and Will Tant, and like all these other guys, CJ and Damian Hopgood. And and then this guy dies, and Will and I are in the water, and we're like, pulling him up on his board, and just, his eyes rolled back in his head, and foam was coming out of his mouth. And it was just like this moment where you're like, yeah, I'm not guaranteed anything. I'm not guaranteed tomorrow. And, and then I just started thinking about like my son and all this stuff. So, it shook me.
Wow. That's heavy. I never heard that story. Okay. So, well, then you being a Christian, how did that didn't take you out of the water, obviously. I mean, how did that help you?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like my faith, so, it might be kind of a hard question to kind of answer, but
yes, that's fine.
The black and white of, I guess what you're asking is, my faith was what kind of pulled me through.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
But I still had to go through my own battles. I still had to walk the walk, and I still had to like figure things out. And I had questions, and, it was just like, you're walking this path, and all of a sudden it's like, you're at a fork in the road, and you're like, holy cow, like that was crazy what I experienced, and it was life changing. So, it could have kind of taken me one way, or it could have taken me another. And for me, my faith is really what has kept me grounded. And, I realized like early on, like surfing is a gift, and God has given me the ability to do this, and he provided the career and all the opportunities in it. But I still had to kind of like be faithful and take those steps. It wasn't like he was just going to hand everything to me. He kind of presented it, and then I had to kind of like do the work. And that's a lot of where your faith builds and your character is shaping. And, because when you experience things that you don't want to experience, it's like, it can be uncomfortable. It can be gnarly. Like, gosh, why did I have to go through that? And some of the things that I look back upon now, I understand why I had to go through them. But in the moment, some of those things are really painful, and you're like, I don't like this, but your character gets shaped and defined through those experiences.
So you said you didn't like this. Were you blaming like God? Or what do you mean you didn't like this? I mean, I understand you didn't.
Well,
like
I mean,
how did that?
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. So like, yeah. So whenever you go through something that you're like, Lord, why am I going through this?
Yeah. Okay. That's,
You know, you're like, I think we all have those questionable moments where
questioning.
like, gosh, you know, God, why? Yeah. Like, why am I having to go through this? You know, because sometimes early on, I had this belief, or not belief, but I think I just thought like, oh, if you're serving God, like everything's going to be wonderful. And
yes.
it's going to be like a bed of roses. And the truth is, it's just not that way.
Yeah.
And so through life and all those experiences and the cutting and the things that haven't gone my way, or the things that have caused me to question certain things, that's where your faith really gets ironed out, you know. And some of the things that, you know, I went through, like, you know, for example, the guy that passed away,
Yeah.
I wrestled with that for a long time. I was like, you know, Lord, why didn't you heal him? Why didn't you save him? You know, and because, you know, we prayed for him, you know, but it didn't happen.
Yeah.
You know, and so I wrestled with that for a while,
Yeah.
amongst other things, but, you know, just not everything's answered in the time fashion that, you know, you might want it to be.
Right. Okay.
And that can be tough for some people.
That can be really, yeah. I mean, yeah, of course. All right. That was kind of heavy. I didn't even see that coming. That's crazy. But I now we understand where you're coming from more. Does that make sense? Or I do, at least. Okay, so when you go back to the coming out of Hawaii and you're going home, you think the waves are back in the day big. You realize they're not big at home, even though they're firing at home big. Does that make sense? You can't compare the two?
You know, we've had some Hawaii-like moments.
Okay, like moments, yeah.
And there's been some pretty sizable days that I've surfed with, like Brett down on the island, and where you're kind of going like, whoa, that's big. Yeah. And it reminds you of Hawaii. And it's not to say that like it couldn't be kind of like Hawaii, but Hawaii is just so different. And it's really hard to explain. I don't think you can. But, you know, we have waves that get Hawaii-like, but Hawaii is Hawaii.
Yeah.
You know, just like Chopu is Chopu. Like, Chopu is just a whole nother animal.
Have you surfed Chopu?
I have not surfed Chopu, but I had friends that I made early on my surf contest days, like that had gone on to go like ASP route, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, that surfed it, and they were like, "That's the scariest thing I've ever done."
Yeah, I bet. Okay, so actually, one question I had for you is: at one point, I can't remember in this interview, you bring up wanting to turn pro and having to go to Hawaii. What age bracket? How old were you when you? And why did you want to turn pro? Or, you know, where was it in your mind that you told yourself, "I'm going to turn pro"?
I wanted to do it, and I had a pretty close friend, and I won't name names.
Okay.
He basically told me, he's like, yeah, you know, like, you're pretty good, but I just don't think you have it in you.
Okay.
And I was like, what? I was like, you're going to say that? Like, he's like, yeah, he goes, you just don't have the personality. He goes, you're just not going to make it. And I left there pissed. I'm like, I'm going to show him, I'm going to show him the opposite. Yeah. And I was really surprised because like, this was a good friend of mine. He had been supportive. He had helped me out a bunch. And then for him just to turn around and say that, I was just like, what? You know? And, so I was like, well, I'm going to prove you wrong. Mm-hmm. And not to say that was my only motivation, but that gave me a lot of motivation. I was also at a period of my life where I had just had a pretty long relationship with a girl, and she broke my heart. And I kind of moped around for about 3 weeks, And one of my other friends grabbed me. His name's Barry Price, and a great surfer.
Yeah.
Been a mentor for me. And he just kind of grabbed me and shook me. He's like, dude, he's like, what are you doing? He's like, there's many more ladies out there, many more fish in the sea. He's like, you got this possibility to make this as a surf career, and you're going to like just throw it away. Like, what are you doing? And I was just like, you're right. Like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
And so I literally got on a trip to Costa Rica like 2 weeks after that, and boom, it was that was like that turning point that I needed.
Okay, so that turning point. So those 3 weeks you were kind of running around. Let's dig into that a little bit, if you won't mind. What does that mean? You like gave up, so you just kind of quit life? I mean, what do you mean by that?
You know,
bummed, obviously.
I mean, when you're heartbroken, it sucks.
No,
You know?
horrible.
Yeah, it's like the worst feeling ever, and it's just I felt like I just wallowed around for like 3 weeks. There were waves, and I just didn't have the motivation to go surfing.
Yeah. Okay.
And I was just like, and my friends are like, what is wrong with you? They're like, the waves are pumping and you don't want to go surfing. And I'm just like, I was just bummed. I was I was just in a bad place. And, it took my buddy just grabbing me and shaking me and like being like, wake up, like smack. And I'm like, oh yeah. And he spoke some life into me and, gave me the truth.
Okay. And that turned you around. That was a good move.
Yeah, that was a great move. I was just kind of like, yeah, you're right. And then I had a trip come up that I got invited to go on.
Yeah, awesome.
Epic trip to Costa Rica, and got some killer photos and hooked up with Dick Meseroff from Eastern Surf Magazine, and they ran a big spread, did a big write up.
Okay.
And it was like, and I just kind of used that trip to like, it was like kind of like a fire had gotten lit underneath of me. So
perfect.
That was kind of like the catalyst.
Yeah, right on. Then you were also talking about like some of like Wes Lane was kind of a role model for you. Mm-hmm. But now that you're one of the older surfers, do you have kids you're kind of mentoring, or kids that look at you as a role model?
Yeah, so I think Jesse and we both kind of like poured into Brett and kind of paved a path for him. Okay. And he ran with it, kind of took it to like a whole nother level. And then there's a local kid here now, younger kid by the name of Will Dean, who's like super talented, great style. And basically like he's been just like crushing it. In the last couple of years, he's really stepped it up. But I had a chance to like, coach him and guide him and give him surf lessons and do a lot of things early on to kind of like help shape him and, just get him to where he was a better contest surfer and all this stuff. And, and it's just been really cool to see these guys like take what little bit of like what we're depositing into them and then them running with it.
This Grom, how did he come to you, or did you see him and ask, give your help? Basically, I'm asking, did it happen organically, or someone raised their hand?
It was probably a little bit of both.
Okay.
His dad approached me and was like, "Hey, do you mind spending some time with Will? We know you've kind of been down this route, and suss him out. Let us know what you think." And so, it was kind of organic, but it was also kind of like his parents, recognizing like, hey, he loves this sport.
Yep.
He's actually kind of good at it.
Yep.
Does he have potential? Do you think he can make it? All that kind of stuff. So, I got with him, and right away I just saw like, okay, yeah, he's got some talent. He's got some abilities. Let's kind of like, get rid of some of the like things that are hanging him up, see if he can kind of get over those humps, and then put in some of these new things, to his surfing to make him better. And he did it pretty quickly. So it was kind of cool to see that progress taking place. And I mean, I know like especially the last year, plus he's grown some,
Okay.
And kind of what I told them from the beginning, I was like, Will needs to get some muscles. He's this little grom. He's kind of getting like tossed around by the waves, but he's got the talent. He's just, once he gets a little more muscle, you're going to see that kind of change everything. And so, especially this year, I've seen that growth in him tremendously, especially through like a lot of his Instagram posts and all that kind of stuff.
What's how old's Will?
I think he's like 14.
Okay, so he's still young, but
yeah, he's still pretty young.
Is the talent today greater or the same as when you were a grom, surfing contests and so forth? Do you see more talent today, or is it getting coming out
talent
earlier?
Is in like the amount of kids?
Well, the amount of kids is one, but also the kids that do show the talent, are they showing it at an earlier age? Is the question.
Yeah, I think the talent, you don't see quite maybe as much of it as you used to.
Okay.
And I only say that because the level of expectation now for these up-and-coming surfers is so high. Like, to give you an example, back in the day, like, if you could do a really nice roundhouse cutback or a big off the top or something, you had potential.
Yes.
Nowadays, you better be able to land a frontside air reverse at will.
Yes.
Or you don't really have a shot.
No, it's so true. That's kind of what I'm asking. And how do you think pro surfing's heading? Is there, the WSL is kind of what everyone's looking to as the model, but it's changing its format, which it actually always has. Mm-hmm. So the amateur ranks are going to fall in underneath it. Do you think that there's room for improvement, I guess, is the question?
Yeah, I think there's always room for improvement.
Okay.
As long as I was a professional surfer, I felt like there was always things I could perfect, even the most basic things like the bottom turn, because the bottom turn sets up everything.
Yep.
So I don't ever think that any surfer probably has ever arrived and felt like, oh, I'm as good as I'm going to be and I can't get any better.
Yeah.
And of course I look at Slater. I'm a Slater fan. Sorry.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are, but I still feel like probably Kelly feels like he can get better.
Yeah, for sure.
Have
you surfed against Kelly?
Long time ago.
Okay. How'd you do?
And you gonna make me answer that? Yeah, no. He beat me.
Okay.
Yeah, it was King of the Peak, long time ago. I did have a good heat.
Inlet?
Yeah.
Okay. So it was home break. That's
yeah, it was home break. I felt like I had a pretty good heat against him. And of course you come in and some people are like, oh man, I think you might have got him and this and that. But no, he smashed it. And that was the one year that the King of the Peak ran. And if you won the heat, you had to stay in the water and surf again.
Oh, that's kind of rad. I kind of like that.
Yeah. And the crazy thing is he won like 13 heats in a row.
Oh.
So he was in the water.
Hours in the water or whatever?
He was, the heats were like 15 minutes, I believe.
15 okay, that's fair.
It was, yeah. Eventually they went to 20 and then 25, but.
So he's exhausted.
So he surfed for hours and just waxing like everybody. We were just
I love that format. I never heard that. Awesome.
This guy's a freak. Yeah, Matt Keckley.
Yep.
Ran the event, and it was either 15 or 20-minute heats. I can't quite remember.
That's rad.
But yeah, he went through everybody, and just.
How long did you stay in the water?
I got through a couple heats,
okay.
But I didn't make it very far. And back then, it was like every time you won, it was like you were gaining like a skin, you know. So
yes.
At the end of the day, he had like 13 skins, so he won the event, won all the money, and we were just like, okay, you're the man.
That's awesome. That sounds super fun.
Yeah, that was a super fun event. I did that event probably 5 years in a row, and it was kind of cool because you'd see guys get on a roll, and they would just start winning, And
Yeah.
every heat they would win, it would be cash in their pocket. So they were stoked.
Yeah. All right. Well, with no downtime and you're surfing good, you kind of keep surfing good. Sometimes in between heats, it can change everything. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, you get out of rhythm, and
Yeah.
rhythm is everything. You know, it's like you see it even in like college basketball, NBA basketball
100%.
teams get on a run, and then the coach calls timeout. Why do they call timeout?
Yeah.
Because they want to stop that rhythm.
That's right. Yeah, for sure. Okay. Now, North Carolina and Outer Banks as a surf destination, it's become kind of a surf destination now, would you say?
Absolutely.
Was it when you were a kid, and do you like that idea as it being a surf destination?
I think back in the day, because it was less known, it was probably less of a destination,
More of a secret kind of place?
more of a secret, kind of a secret spot. And then, of course, as the years rolled out and more guys did well from this area, like Matt Beecham, Jesse Hines, myself, we kind of put the Outer Banks a little bit more in a place where people are like, oh, the East Coast has surf.
Yeah.
Because for a while, like on a lot of my earlier trips, I'd meet people from California, Europe, different places. I'd be on trips with different people, and they're like, East Coast has waves? And I'm like, yeah. And they're just like, really? They're like, where do you live? And I tell them, they'll be like, where's that? And I'm like, well, if you look at the map, it's these little barrier islands that kind of stick out the furthest, and that's where we are. And they're like, oh, wow, okay. And then some of those people eventually made their way over, caught really good surf, and we're like, you weren't lying. Like, no, it can get really good.
Yeah. On an average year, how many good days do you have?
I'd say outside of the summer months,
Okay.
you may get a few days there, like each month.
Okay.
And it really depends on weather patterns and all that kind of stuff. But typically in each month, like once you get into like fall and spring,
Okay.
we kind of get in these weather patterns where like you can have pretty good surf like about every 5 days.
Oh, okay.
And it gets in like a pattern.
Yep.
And then sometimes it will, of course, break pattern, and you'll go like 2 or 3 weeks where it just kind of is bad.
Yeah.
So it kind of varies a little bit. I mean, I don't think I could give you a totally accurate number, but
I was just asking like average, like it's worth to make that trip out there then, right? If you wanted to surf something different. I mean, nowadays, especially with like Surfline and all the forecasts and all those things, like we kind of knew this last swell that we just had was coming. Yes.
And everybody saw it coming. And it was like, okay, boom, the winds are looking good. Forecast is looking good. You're always hoping that it's as good as they say that it is going to be, or it looks. And sometimes there's some factors that kind of wreck that. But this last swell was really good.
Yeah. No, I saw some like footage. Epic, really. And then your movies, going back to your faith, Noah's Ark. Who came to you? Why was that movie? Obviously, we know why the movie was made, but how did that project come about?
So Noah's Ark came about from Nick McLean.
Okay.
He had moved here from Maryland, and he'd met up with Matt. He's pretty much been in the faith his whole life, and he kind of heard about our story. And he was like, man, that's a rad story. And he had done these other short films, Delbert, Metamorphosis, and some other ones. And then Brian Jennings and those guys had done, or were doing the film The Outsiders.
Okay.
And so kind of all that stuff was at play. And, but he just thought our story was really cool, of like how we all came to know the Lord, what happened on that day, and then the after effects of that, like the domino effect of like the different people's lives that were affected. And he's like, man, I just want to tell that story. And I was like, I'm in.
Okay.
And we had no idea that it was going to go global.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we thought like, okay, cool. Like we'd make this little movie and we'd show it at some places and it might impact, a couple hundred people.
Yeah.
And man, God took it and just, it impacted thousands. And I'm still baffled as to how many places that film has gone. And it's in like 8 or 9 different languages.
Oh, wow.
And
I didn't know that.
yeah, it's just crazy. And we took it on tour. I mean, we toured the whole East Coast, the West Coast. And then it went like international. I mean, I went to Australia. So it went above and beyond anything I ever imagined. And I think Nick would say the same thing.
Awesome. And it was a good time making it. And how was the tour? Was it fun doing that?
Yeah,
people, probably a lot of non-surfers too.
Yeah, I mean it impacted everybody.
Yeah,
100%. Because it was like a testimony. It was like, wow, this is what happened in my life.
Yeah,
and you can't denounce somebody's testimony. So it was cool, and we got to meet just tons of people, and hear their stories, and and the film brought a lot of life to a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And it got a lot of people like kind of back on track. Like people were like constantly telling me like, man, I was struggling, and that thing just energized me, and that was the goal behind it, is that it would just speak life to people. Yeah.
Cool. Right on. How does surfing and then being a Christian and then like your family life with surfing?
Like, how does it all tie?
How does it all tie together? I guess it's all part of your life, honestly, but like being a family man, right? You have kids? How many kids you
have? I have 2 teenagers.
Yeah, 2 teenagers. So you have your kids, you have your wife. Mm-hmm. And what's your wife's name? Is Carissa?
Yeah, Carissa Snyder. Yeah.
Carissa? Okay.
Well, Ezra is my boy, and he just actually turned 18. And then Jada is my daughter, and she's a little over 15. And cool. I'm in teenager impact land.
That's probably changed mine too.
It has in many ways. But yeah, I mean, my wife has been a big inspiration as far as she's kept me grounded. Like, I feel like the Lord just gave me the perfect person.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Because she grew up in the church. I didn't.
Yeah.
She actually was a pastor's kid.
Oh, okay.
And so her road was much different than mine. And then we met at such a interesting time, because like I didn't want anything to do with girls at the time, if you can believe that, because I had just given my life to the Lord, and I had come out of some relationships that weren't healthy, and I was just like, I got to figure this thing out. I just don't want anything to do with girls. I need to focus in on my surfing.
Yeah.
Boom. And she was kind of the same way. She had backslidden, and she had just, made some choices that, she didn't want to make. And so she came down here kind of like on a retreat, and she didn't want anything to do with boys or guys. Yeah. And then we met, and it was like pretty much an instant like spark. And I was just like, wait a second, this wasn't supposed to happen like this. And it was just kind of undeniable, like that he put her right in my path. And, so she's been like the biggest voice in my life, from surfing to, artwork, and really just to my faith, just keeping me grounded. And, she's like, I'm just so stoked that I met her.
Yeah.
And that we crossed paths.
Perfect. How long have you guys been married?
This October 1st, will be 23 years.
Wow. Congratulations. That's a long time.
Thank you. Yeah. And I tell everybody, and we still like each other.
That's cool. The way it should be, right? You hope.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's been, marriage is like, it's so crazy when you go to get married and you're standing up there at the altar and you're just like, till death do us part, for better, for worse, for sicker, for poorer, all these things. And you're repeating these things. And in that moment, you're in like kind of this like such a blissful state that you're just like, you're not really thinking about those things. But then when you actually have to walk through them, you're like, oh my
Yes.
gosh,
Yeah,
like
you're right.
this is what I signed up for. This was the vow that I made. And like, so it's when you actually have to walk that out, you're like, wow, this is crazy. And she's just been there by my side through my ups and my downs. And yeah, she's just been a blessing in so many ways.
Not to push too hard, but so you're saying that you're kind of oblivious. You're just in the moment when you say your vows, right? You're saying, but then 5, 10, 20 years later, something happens and you have to have that talk in your head. Like, this is what I signed up for. This is what I promised. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Cause I mean, like I said, it kind of goes back to like what I said earlier. It's like things get hard. And then the first thing that people want to do is they want to just quit.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. You're right.
They just want to throw in the towel. And they're like, I didn't sign up for it. Well, wait a second. You did.
Yeah, you did.
And a lot of people think divorce is the way. Like, well, I'll just get married. And if it just doesn't work out, I'll just get divorced. And it's like, no, should be the opposite. It's like, no, you're making this commitment to this person. You need to stick with them because every one of us has issues, like,
For sure.
and it just, somebody's issues might be a little different than the next person's, but when you're committed to somebody and you decide like, hey, I'm going to pour into this person, that's life changing. And that's life, it's like not giving up on people. And yeah, there's been a few different times where she could have easily gave up on me, cause surfers we're stubborn in our ways. Surf comes up and we're like, nothing else matters. I got to go surf,
Yeah.
And, but yeah, she's put up with a good part of me. But she stuck with me. So I'm honored.
Right on. Okay. So if people can't see this, maybe one day we'll post this on YouTube or something, but you got 2 pieces of like beautiful waves in the background. You said one of them is your artwork and one's your dad's. So obviously your dad was an inspiration to you being an artist. Is that correct? I mean, am I assuming that correctly?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's all I saw him do, outside of like surfing. He had some earlier jobs that kind of, helped pay the bills, all that kind of stuff. But then as he developed his art, like it became more full time and he basically like became more diverse, and he went from airbrushing to doing oils to doing sculptures to doing murals on sides of buildings. And I was just like, whoa, that's really cool. And I was into it, but I at the time it wasn't like a passion in me that like burned, and surfing was that passion. And so like, out of high school, I took art in high school, and then I had about a year of COA college, which is our community college.
Okay.
And I was taking the art, and then surfing took off.
Okay.
And it was like, and my dad was like, well, yeah, go for it. He's like, when are you ever going to get this opportunity again to, pursue surfing? He's like, you gotta go for it. He's like, if it doesn't work out, you can always go back to school, figure out whatever you want to do. So many years later, art has now come back full circle, and it's a passion that burns within me. And like the image behind me is just one that was in my head, because all the years of surfing, it's like, I feel like have kind of prepped me for this. And, and the art has been a blessing, and people are stoked on it. And my style is a bit different. And I think that's what people are gravitating towards. And then, so I'm just kind of like walking through this open door. It's pretty cool.
So when did it become a passion for you? Was it how many years has it been? And was it due to the fact that your pro career was like wrapping up, or like at what point?
So like a quick story was my pro career, I transitioned into doing sports marketing for Hurley.
Okay.
And so I was help running events, contests, in and out of the shops, making sure that they had what they needed. And then, all that kind of came to a halt. And at the time I had been in kind of like forming up like my own like surf boot camp, like fitness.
Yep.
So I had basically transitioned out of all that into the fitness, and from there I was helping my wife basically, like she had like a furniture business and some different things. So I was building furniture. It's just so happened I stumbled upon, these guys like, they were doing these crazy fractal burns on bar tops where they're like electrocuting the wood, and it's like, it's following the grains of the wood and all that kind of stuff. And then they're pouring it with resin and different things. And so I thought it would be really cool to like burn her furniture. And she got kind of mad at me. And number one, she was having a hard time selling the furniture because people wanted to pay like Walmart prices.
Yes.
And literally her conversation to me was, it looks more artsy. She's like, why don't you just go and do some art and quit burning my furniture? And she's like, go burn something else.
It's funny.
And I was just like, kind of bummed in the moment. I'm like, she doesn't like what I'm doing, So behold, there was this piece of wood that I picked up, and I'm like, oh, it kind of looks like a wave.
Yeah.
And then it had a crack in it, and so I burn it, put a little paint on it. If I showed it to you now, you'd probably laugh at it. But I was like, hey, babe, look at this. And she's like, exactly. She goes, it looks great. She goes, now see if you can sell it.
Yeah.
And she's like, because we're having a hard time selling furniture. She's like, artists put things on the wall, and people pay like $800,000, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so that one piece turned into two, then into three, and then I had a few of them, and I went out one day and just showed them to a couple people, and they were like, wow, this is really cool. It's really different. And they're like, can we take them? Can we put them up in our place? And, if somebody wants to buy them, we'll sell them. I'm like,
cool.
Sure. And they all sold.
Brad.
And I was just like, okay, here we go. Right. And that was like the next chapter. And that happened right before, it was about a year prior to COVID.
Mm.
I started getting into, that's when all that took place. And then COVID hit. Mm. And then the gym was like shut down. And I'm like, crap, what are we going to do? And so I just dove headfirst into the art.
Wow.
And,
smart.
And I wanted to do it too. And there was a lot of downtime.
Yeah.
And everything became online and through social media and all that kind of stuff. And so I just began like posting things here and there and hoping that it would gain traction. And then it started to. And now fast forward to now, it's like, we're at like 4 years later.
Yeah.
And it's just like,
so it's just pretty new at it then, basically, really.
Yeah. I mean, as far as the whole art scene and community and all that kind of stuff, I'm a rookie again. It's almost like I'm starting over. It's like, I had my surf career. I knew what it was like to be a rookie. You kind of had to pay your dues and, put your time in, and the art community is kind of like that too. It's like, just doing what you got to do and meeting people and going places, and it's been a new experience.
Your dad was already an established artist, so that had to help.
Yeah, I think that definitely he kind of paved the way for me in a lot of ways. So my art career and my surf career are kind of similar in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's awesome. What does your dad think about your art? I mean, they're kind of inspired the same inspiration to me. I'm not an artist, so I don't really. But you're in the same realm. Mm-hmm. Are you? I guess that's the question.
Yeah, his style is different than mine.
Okay.
And he does a lot of different stuff.
Okay.
So, and I guess that's the beauty of art, is there really is no wrong direction you can take.
Okay.
And there really is no limitations, and you can make it as crazy and abstract as you want to, mm-hmm. or you can be like super fine, like almost like realism.
All right.
So it really it's for me, if you're like, how do you judge art? I'm like, it's really hard to, because it's kind of like it really has no boundaries.
Yeah. What inspires you? I mean, obviously the ocean. You have a couple sea lions. I mean, I went through your Instagram. It's loaded. It's rad. It's pretty rad stuff, actually.
Ah, thank you. Yeah, the ocean is definitely probably my main inspiration. But just also my style working with the fractal burning and all that kind of stuff. It's like, well, how would that translate to, a sea turtle, or how would that translate to, a cow, or, whatever. There's a lot of different, or an octopus or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's finding really for me, I think too, like, because there's certain images like that my style probably wouldn't fare the best with. Mm-hmm. It would be okay, but there's certain ones that I've found that work really well, like the waves. I mean,
Yeah. No.
like you're looking at that image behind me, and all the dark in there
Yeah, it's rad.
is that fractal, and it just gives it like feel and depth. And waves are kind of crazy, and the fractal burning is kind of crazy. So when you electrocute a piece of wood, I mean, it's like, burns are going everywhere, and it creates these patterns and these grooves in the wood that you could never like replicate. Mm-hmm. And it's just really different. So
Totally
it's just finding out what that works well with. So
I think on one of your videos I saw, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like you did the fractal burning, which is totally interesting. That's a whole thing I don't want to go down, but it's pretty rad. I don't know how you even do it. But it looks like it gives it an offshore, like the lip, like an offshore look. Does that make it? I don't know how you make it all go one direction, but that makes sense. That's my interpretation of it.
Yeah, so it gives it that feel.
Yeah. Okay.
And haven't given away some of the secrets, but I've figured out how to
And I wasn't asking.
kind of control it.
Oh, okay.
So
Cool.
That's the part of it that's gotten really cool, is I've figured out how to manipulate it a little bit and make it do certain things. But ultimately it still has a mind of its own. And each piece that I do, it's like when I started, I'm like, okay, I don't totally know how this is going to totally look, but that's the fun part of it and the cool part of it. And, and also the faith part of it is like, well, you just got to do it and see what happens. And you might make a mistake or two, but if you do, you can always go back and, try to make it look right.
And then you have a gym too. So so what would be your regular job? The gym?
As of right now, my gym, personal training,
Yep.
And then the art. So that's kind of where I'm landing right now.
All right. Does it take away from your surfing? Having to make money to live?
The transition from professional surfer, and I think Wes even talked about it because I listened to his podcast.
Yeah.
Into your next thing that you're going to do. Mm-hmm. Like I said, you better have a plan. Yeah. Because the professional surfing only lasts but so long. And I know with like Wes, like the prize money today is way different than the prize money back in the day. And, so you got to have a plan. And that transition period for me was a little bit tougher because there was a lot of things that happened, and of course COVID like basically almost took my gym away. Like it was just crazy. Like,
I mean, gnarly.
We barely made it through that whole thing. Like
I'm glad you did, really, honestly.
I looked at my business partner and I'm like, I was like, we might be done. And the thing that we worked so hard for is just like gone, so we held on and we did our best and we took it on the chin, and we were just like hoping and praying like that we get through this thing. And now this year, the way it's gone so far, it looks like as long as nothing else crazy happens, it looks like we're going to make it. So,
cool. Good news.
The struggle is real, but,
for sure.
But at the same time, the struggle, was where the art was really born.
Okay. And how would you label your pro career? Were you doing maybe you don't have to answer this, but like financially, was pro surfing enough you could live off? Or do you have to do other things too, like work for Hurley and stuff?
Yeah. So, I mean, I wasn't making millions.
No.
But I was making enough to where I was able to get a house.
Cool. Good.
I was able to do some of those things that, some of the guys weren't able to because of just the way the dice rolled and for them and all that kind of stuff. And, but do I wish I could have made a little bit more? Yeah.
Of course.
But at the same time, when you're in that moment, you're kind of like, okay, cool. This is where I'm at. This is what I know. There are maybe a couple things that, I think any one of us can look back at our lives and be like, I wish I would have done this a little bit different or done that a little bit different. And I think I have a few of those moments in my surf career, but ultimately, I did the best with what I had and got to see some really cool places and meet some really cool people. And it was a pretty incredible ride, especially through the Billabong and Hurley and all that kind of stuff. I mean, Bob Hurley and those guys, they just gave me opportunities that I never would have had with, other people.
Do you think you being an East Coast guy helped? Was it an advantage being one of the top East Coast surfers?
I think so. And I also made myself pretty diversified.
Okay.
And I showed them hey, I can not only surf, but I can do the marketing. I can do the events. I can do X, Y, and Z. So I think some of that stuff definitely helped and prolonged my surf career and my time with them. But, like I said, I saw some things coming and, when Nike basically bought Hurley, things began to change.
Yes.
And things got tighter and harder. And, it was kind of one of those things where I was just like, well, I don't know how much longer this is going to be like this, but hopefully, you just never know. And then, I wish things would have worked out differently.
Yes.
But like I said, that's life.
That is.
Can't always control everything.
And then the Hall of Fame. So I saw online the North Carolina Surfing Hall of Fame. How rad's that? You got inducted?
Yeah. Along with a few other guys.
Yeah.
And
awesome.
Yeah. It was just kind of unexpected. I was like, this is really cool. Yeah. Just to be, and, to have your name up there with, some of the other greats and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's an honor. And yeah, I'm kind of speechless on that part of it.
So has North Carolina, when you started surfing and today, have they embraced surfing? Have they all, and back in the day, were they embracing surfing as a whole community of North Carolinians or whatever they're called? Whatever you're called.
A North Kakalaki.
Is that what they're called?
There's a lot of terms that have been given for North Carolinians and surfers and all that kind of stuff. So, I think back in the day, surfing had a little bit of a bad reputation at times.
Okay.
And over the course of the years, I think the professional aspect of surfing through the contests and the industry and all that kind of stuff, people saw actually, you know what? There is a lot of good. They are doing a lot of good for the community and all this kind of stuff. So, there might have been a few bad apples that kind of gave a bad rap, but I think over the course of time, it's much more embraced now. Okay. And, people see it for what it is, that it is truly a sport. And I think for a while, it was always a sport, but, it was is it going to ever make it into the Olympics? And, is it going to become as big as, these other things? And, and I think it's really heading in it's heading in a great direction. I think there's, some things that could potentially change. But ultimately, the sport itself it's such a blessing. And then if you're a surfer, it's just you get it, you understand it, because I think it was an old Billabong slogan that says only a surfer knows the feeling.
Right. Yeah.
It's if you're not a surfer, it's you can't totally relate. You can't totally get it. But then once you ride a wave, you're like, holy beep. Like, you're like, wow, this is like crazy. And so, and then the spectator side of it too. It's like you got the Nazare, the big wave stuff there. That's just like, people are going like, that's just crazy.
Yeah, it is. 100%.
It is crazy.
You guys are nuts.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've been out on like 30-foot surf, and these guys are surfing 3 times that.
Yeah.
And I'm like going, that's just crazy.
30-foot surf at North Carolina or in Hawaii?
Hawaii, but there was this one hurricane swell that came through, Hurricane Teddy. It wasn't last year, but I think it was the year prior. Okay. And it was like 15 feet at 18 seconds.
Oh.
And
super long
we went out basically through the middle of the inlet, and it was like a sight I had never seen before. Mm-hmm. I was just like, I mean, you're talking like 7 rows of whitewater, and the type of whitewater that you don't want to get caught in.
Yeah.
And we talked about it on the skis on our way out. We were like, if you get caught in there, the ski probably isn't going to be able to get to you, mm-hmm. because there was so much foam and so much turbulence. And when that happens under a ski, it's hard for that ski to get going, And we got outside, and some of the, I call them mountains that came through, were just crazy. And it was, the wind was on it a little bit, so it made it a little bit eerie, a little bit scary. And we got a few waves that day, but it was just like some of the biggest surf that I've ever seen here. Wow. And just the power, the amount of water that was moving, and just, catching a couple of the waves where you stand up and you're going down, and it's like, and your board is just chattering. It's all you can do to like all your leg strength just to like keep yourself on the surfboard. Okay,
so I'm about to wrap this up, but now I got another question. So why did you go out there? If it's that big, you have nothing to prove. You have nothing to prove pro surfing wise.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you're trying to prove it to your peers or to yourself, or I mean, what was that switch? You knew it was super dangerous. Why did you go out?
It's just in my blood.
Okay.
That's about the only way I can describe it.
It's super dangerous. You got a family, you got a wife, and I'm not harassing you. I'm just curious because I wouldn't do it.
Yeah. I mean, my wife, she was a little bit like, you be careful when you come back to me. And on our way out, it was like reality check. It's like, wow, sure. Like it's giant, it's, like every one of us was scared, and
legit.
It was like your heart's pounding and you're just like going, okay. And if things go bad on the ski, you've got to be, willing to, you got to get in.
Yeah.
That means you got to go through it. Yeah. So, you just have to have that mindset of like, I'm committing to this, I'm going, and, I hope that all pans out well.
It did.
But,
yeah.
It did. But, there can be those times where things don't go your way. But, I mean, I was curious. I just wanted to see it. I was like, 15 feet at 18 seconds. That's like Hawaii.
Yeah.
Readings. That's not like normal East Coast readings.
Right.
So we were all just like, yeah, we knew like the inlet would be probably the only place that could handle that. Mm-hmm. And we were like, we just want to see it. Wow. Because we knew everywhere else would be like maxed out.
Yeah.
And it was. And but it was just crazy. Just to even go out there, even if you just didn't catch a wave.
But you did.
But it did, yeah. But just to see it.
Yeah.
No, but just to see it as a win is a win. Yes. But then to catch it is like icing on the cake.
Yeah, it's so rad that you did it. I'm just trying to get behind in your head, like, what were you thinking? My whole thought's totally different.
Well, yeah, there might have been a part of my brain that wasn't thinking.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, okay. You got any final words, Noah?
And thank you for having me on. And,
super fun. Thank you for doing it.
Yeah, it's awesome. yeah, just thankful for, of course, my wife who's supported all this stuff and all my craziness and shenanigans and surfing crazy waves. And she was a part of my whole surf career and all that kind of stuff. So she's been truly like my ace of spades in the pocket. Like, she's just been such a support.
That's rad.
Yeah, my kids have just kept me humble. And I've just had a bunch of different people along the way speak into my life at different times, from mentors, elders, surfers, and just a couple names that come off the top of my head. Barry Price, Lynn Shell, my dad, Stuart Taylor, a handful of these guys really did shape me and help me through like some really tough periods. And then, Bob Hurley, Paul Gomez, like just Chewy Reyna, number of guys that just believed in me and sponsored me through the years and all that kind of stuff. I mean, so, I wouldn't have been where I am today without like all this support. And there's a lot of names that I didn't get to name, otherwise we'd be on here like another 2 hours. But yeah, there's a lot of guys that just poured into my life. And so I'm just thankful.
Awesome. All right, you guys, this is Mike and Noah. Thank you again, Noah. And we're out of here.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hey, you guys, Endless Summer box set. This thing is legit. It's authentic, numbered certificate in it. It has a 5-frame film strip from the original print. You literally own a piece of history. It has a specially minted bronze medallion. Dude, that thing's sick. Okay, there's so much more here. Go to the show notes. There's a link on there. Go check this piece of history out. This thing's rad. Seriously. Smithsonian American History Museum has it. It took 4 years of research with 3.5 in production, all hand assembled. This thing's rad. There's so much to this awesome box set. Remastered DVD, sharper images than the original film, but dude, this thing's so sick. Link in the show notes.